Hi, I'm Mira. Welcome to another story. Let's see where this one takes us. The asteroid retirement home of Starlight Haven hung in space like a forgotten relic, its battered dome occasionally illuminated by the flicker of passing starships. Inside, the residents had gathered in the common room, where Myrna, a former galactic general turned activities committee chair, stood at the head of the room with the air of someone about to lead troops into battle. "Listen up, everyone," she said, slapping a copy of Zarptooth the Merciless's eviction notice onto the bingo table. "We've got ourselves a situation. Galactic Overlord wants us out so he can turn this place into a spa." The room erupted into protests. "A spa? What kind of overlord needs a spa?" squawked Zorp, a bird-like alien whose feathers were starting to fray at the edges. "Don't underestimate a well-moisturized enemy," murmured Clovis, a green-skinned humanoid with a penchant for dramatic pessimism. Blob, a gelatinous being who had long since merged with their recliner, let out a resigned gurgle. "Does this mean no more space jello Thursdays?" Myrna slammed her hand on the table, silencing the room. "Enough! We're not going to sit here and let some glorified landlord kick us out. We've survived wars, wormholes, and that terrible karaoke night last month. This is our home, and we're going to fight for it." "How?" Zorp asked, flapping his wings nervously. "Zarptooth has an entire fleet. We've got bingo cards. We also have the Starfish Delight," Myrna said, her grin widening. "The Starfish Delight?" Clovis echoed, their face contorting in disbelief. "That rust bucket hasn't flown in decades. Last time it did, the engine caught fire because someone tried to plug in a toaster." Myrna shrugged. "It's what we've got, and if Zarptooth thinks we're just a bunch of harmless old-timers, he's got another thing coming." The hangar bay was a mess of old parts, questionable wiring, and a ship that looked like it had been held together with hope and duct tape. The Starfish Delight shuddered as its systems came online, a sound that made more than one retiree flinch. "It's alive," Blob gurgled, staring at the ship with what might have been awe or dread. It was hard to tell with a gelatinous face. Myrna stood at the helm, running her hands over the cracked control panel like it was an old friend. "All right, crew, let's make history. Zorp, you've got navigation. Clovis, keep the engine from exploding. Blob, just don't get stuck in anything. And you," Zorp asked, still not entirely convinced this wasn't a terrible idea. "I'll do what I do best," Myrna said with a wink. "Lead." With a groan that could have been mistaken for a death rattle, the Starfish Delight lifted off, its engines sputtering but holding. The residents cheered as the asteroid grew smaller in the rearview monitor, their spirits bolstered by the unexpected success of not immediately dying. "Where exactly are we going?" Clovis asked, wiping grease off their hands as they slumped into the co-pilot's chair. "Zarptooth's headquarters," Myrna replied. The room fell silent. Even Gerald, the ship's irritable AI, let out a disbelieving beep. "You're joking," Zorp finally said. "You're taking us straight to the Galactic Overlord's lair?" "Why not?" Myrna said, punching coordinates into the console. "We're not sneaking around or begging for mercy. We're walking or flying, right up to him and offering a deal he can't refuse." Clovis groaned, leaning back in their chair. "We're doomed." "Maybe," Myrna said, her grin never wavering. "But at least we'll go out with style." As the Starfish Delight limped through hyperspace, the crew worked to patch up systems and prepare for what lay ahead. Zorp fretted over the outdated star maps, muttering about regions labelled uncharted danger zones and definitely not a shortcut. Clovis argued with Gerald over the proper way to recalibrate the shields, while Blob somehow managed to get themselves stuck to a control panel, requiring 20 minutes of squelching teamwork to free them. Myrna, meanwhile, sat at the helm, her eyes fixed on the shimmering streaks of light outside. She could feel the weight of her crew's doubt, the unspoken question hanging in the air. What if this didn't work? What if they failed? But failure wasn't an option. Starlight Haven was more than a retirement home. It was the last refuge for people who had spent their lives fighting battles they hadn't always won. They deserved to rest, to laugh, to eat space jello in peace. And if Zarptooth thought he could take that away, he was about to learn a very important lesson about underestimating retirees. The ship jolted as they dropped out of hyperspace. the asteroid headquarters of Zarptooth the Merciless looming ahead. Bristling with turrets and surrounded by sleek patrol ships, it looked every bit as intimidating as the name suggested. "Here we go," Myrna said, gripping the controls. "Let's show Zarptooth what we're made of." The Starfish Delight sputtered forward, its ancient engines groaning in protest. The crew braced themselves, ready for the fight of their lives, or at least the most dramatic bingo night ever. The Starfish Delight wobbled into the asteroid field surrounding Zarptooth's headquarters, its engines letting out an ominous series of pops that sounded like someone trying to start a lawnmower for the first time. The ship lurched left, then right, before finally stabilizing, barely. "Is it supposed to sound like that?" Zorp squawked, clutching the edges of his console. "No, Gerald," the ship's AI replied with an exasperated tone. "But I'm sure your bingo skills will protect us from catastrophic failure. Can you two shut it?" Clovis grumbled from the engine room, their voice crackling over the comms. "I'm holding this thing together with duct tape and spike down here." Myrna ignored the bickering, her sharp gaze fixed on the asteroid looming ahead. It was surrounded by sleek, menacing patrol ships, their engines glowing with a technological precision that made the Starfish Delight look like a flying junkyard. A moment later, the comm system crackled to life. "The unidentified vessel, state your purpose," came a stern, mechanical voice. Myrna leaned into the console, her voice calm and commanding. "This is the Galactic Mediation Council. We have urgent business with Zarptooth the Merciless." The line went silent. The crew exchanged nervous glances. Then the voice returned, now laced with suspicion. "The Galactic Mediation Council? On that ship?" "Yes," Myrna said, her tone as steady as the ship was unstable. "The Council values efficiency over appearances. Now, are you going to clear us for docking, or should we inform Zarptooth that his guards delayed a critical negotiation?" Another pause, longer this time. Finally, the patrol ships peeled away and the voice responded, "Proceed to docking bay 8. Any deviation will result in your immediate destruction." "Pleasant bunch," Clovis muttered as the ship lurched forward. Docking Bay 8 was every bit as intimidating as the asteroid's exterior. Enormous metal doors sealed behind the Starfish Delight as it clunked onto the platform with all the grace of a drunken asteroid miner. A squad of heavily armed guards waited for them, their armor gleaming under the harsh lights. As the crew descended the ship's rickety ramp, Myrna stepped forward with the confidence of someone who had no idea what she was doing but refused to let anyone else know that. "Take us to Zarptooth," she demanded, hands on her hips. The lead guard, a towering figure with a helmet that gave them the appearance of a disgruntled beetle, hesitated. "He's not expecting you." Myrna raised an eyebrow. "Of course not. It's a surprise mediation. That's the whole point of mediation. Surprises. Now move." The guard blinked, clearly caught off guard by this flawless logic. Finally, they motioned for the squad to escort the crew deeper into the asteroid. Zarptooth's throne room was a monument to excess. The walls were lined with glowing red runes, and a massive chandelier made entirely of weaponized crystals hung overhead, pulsing ominously. Zarptooth himself lounged on a throne carved from obsidian, his armor bristling with spikes and his glowing eyes fixed on the intruders. "Who dares disturb me?" Zarptooth boomed, his voice resonating through the chamber like a distant explosion. Myrna stepped forward, unfazed. "We do. I'm Myrna, chair of the Starlight Haven Activities Committee, and these are my associates." She gestured to the crew, who were attempting various levels of confidence. Zorp gave a hesitant wave, Clovis muttered something inaudible, and Blob let out an awkward gurgle. Zarptooth blinked. "Activities Committee? What nonsense is this?" "We're here to discuss your eviction notice," Myrna said, her tone firm. "You want to turn Starlight Haven into a spa, but I think we can offer you something better." Zarptooth leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. "Better? Explain." "Right now your empire runs on fear and bureaucracy," Myrna said, beginning to pace. "That's unsustainable. People rebel, your resources are stretched thin, and you spend more time putting out fires than expanding your power." Zarptooth's eyes narrowed. "Go on." "Starlight Haven can be your solution," Myrna continued. "Send us your troublemakers. Rebels, failed bureaucrats, anyone who's more trouble than they're worth, we'll keep them out of your way. No more rebellions, no more headaches. Zarptooth tilted his head, considering. And why would I trust a band of geriatrics with such a task? Myrna smirked. Because we've spent decades surviving worse. Between us, we've fought wars, navigated wormholes and hosted karaoke nights. If we can handle that, we can handle anything. Before Zarptooth could respond, a klaxon blared. Incoming ship! Unauthorized entry, the AI announced. Zarptooth's throne room erupted into chaos. Guards scrambled as a rogue vessel appeared on the monitor, its cannons already firing. The ship bore the markings of a rebel fleet. Myrna turned to Zarptooth. You want proof we're capable? Let us handle this. Zarptooth studied her, his glowing eyes narrowing. If you succeed, you have my deal. If you fail... We won't, Myrna said, already marching back toward the Starfish Delight. Zorp trailed behind her, muttering, We're going to die, aren't we? Probably, Myrna replied with a grin, but we'll go down swinging. As the crew scrambled to prepare for battle, the fate of Starlight Haven and their improbable deal hung in the balance. The Starfish Delight groaned as the engines roared to life, its ancient systems barely responding to the frantic commands from its crew. Myrna stood at the helm, her hands flying across the controls, her expression as steady as ever. The view outside the cockpit showed a rapidly approaching rebel ship, its cannons lighting up the void with bursts of plasma fire. Shields? She barked. Clovis's voice crackled over the comms. What shields? The best I can give you is duct tape and optimism. That's more than usual, Zorp muttered, his feathers ruffling as he peered nervously at the navigation console. Gerald? Myrna snapped, her tone sharp enough to cut through the ship's groans. Reroute power to evasive maneuvers. The ship's AI responded with a sigh that somehow conveyed centuries of suffering. Evasive maneuvers engaged, though I must remind you this ship was not designed for combat, or much of anything, really. The Starfish Delight lurched to the side, narrowly avoiding a direct hit from the rebel ship's cannons. Inside, the crew was thrown against walls and chairs, a cacophony of groans and complaints filling the air. This is ridiculous, Zorp squawked, clinging to the console for dear life. We're retirees, not starfighter pilots. We're whatever we need to be, Myrna shot back, her voice steady as she rolled the ship into a sharp turn. Blob, what's the status on the... whatever's in the cargo hold? The gelatinous being, who had somehow oozed their way into the weapon controls, gurgled nervously. I think I've got something glowing. Should I press it? Yes! Myrna yelled. Press all the glowing things. Bloblob's amorphous appendages slapped a series of buttons, and the ship jolted violently as a pair of ancient plasma turrets emerged from its sides. The weapons sputtered for a moment before firing erratically into the void, one blast narrowly missing the rebel ship. That's it! Myrna shouted. Keep them distracted! Distracted? Zorp asked, his voice climbing to an octave no one thought possible. What's the plan, Myrna? Do we even have a plan? Myrna grinned, her eyes glinting with the reckless determination that had kept her alive through decades of intergalactic chaos. We're going to give Zarptooth a reason to appreciate us. Clovis, ready the decoy! Decoy? Clovis's incredulous voice came over the comms. We don't have a... Wait, you mean that? Exactly, Myrna said, throwing the ship into a dive. Time to make some fireworks. In the throne room, Zarptooth watched the battle unfold on a massive monitor, his glowing eyes narrowing as the Starfish Delight weaved between plasma fire with the grace of a drunken asteroid miner. His guards stood at attention, awaiting orders, but Zarptooth raised a hand to silence them. What are they doing? He muttered, leaning forward. Back on the Starfish Delight, Clovis heaved a large crate into the cargo bay airlock, grumbling every curse they could think of. The decoy was a relic from a forgotten era, an old escape pod retrofitted with enough pyrotechnics to simulate a small explosion. It's ready, Clovis called over the comms. But if this thing goes off too soon, it won't, Myrna cut in. Zorp, get us in position. Why do I have to? Zorp started, but Myrna's glare shut him up. Muttering under his breath, he adjusted the ship's trajectory, lining them up with the rebel vessel. Blob, fire the pod! Myrna shouted. With a triumphant gurgle, Blob slapped another glowing button. The escape pod shot out of the airlock, careening toward the rebel ship. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the pod detonated in a dazzling explosion of light and sound, engulfing the rebel ship in a cloud of harmless but blinding sparks. "They're disabled," Zorp squawked, his feathers puffed in disbelief. "It actually worked," Myrna grinned, steering the Starfish Delight back towards Zarptooth's asteroid. "Of course it worked. We're not done yet, though." In the throne room, Zarptooth rose to his feet as the monitor showed the rebel ship drifting aimlessly, its systems clearly offline. The Starfish Delight returned to the docking bay, wobbling like a tired bird but very much intact. The crew disembarked to find Zarptooth waiting for them, his towering form imposing as ever. But instead of anger, his expression carried a hint of amusement and, perhaps, respect. "You've proven yourselves," Zarptooth said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "I'll allow Starlight Haven to remain operational, under one condition." Myrna raised an eyebrow. "And that is?" Zarptooth's sharp-toothed grin widened. "You'll manage every troublesome fool I send your way. Rebels, bureaucrats, even bounty hunters too incompetent to catch their prey. Think of it as early retirement with purpose." Myrna smirked. "Deal." As the crew returned to the Starfish Delight, the mood was a mix of exhaustion and triumph. Zorp flopped into his seat, muttering about needing a vacation from his retirement, while Blob hummed a bubbly tune. Clovis shook their head, wiping soot from their face. "I can't believe we pulled that off." "Believe it," Myrna said, settling into the helm with a satisfied grin. "We've got a new purpose now, crew. Let's make Starlight Haven the best galactic dumping ground there ever was." The Starfish Delight sputtered to life once more, carrying its unlikely heroes back to their asteroid home. They might not have planned for this kind of retirement, but it was shaping up to be their greatest adventure yet. Thanks for listening. If the story stuck with you, come back next time for another journey.